He looked completely normal. A 44-year-old father of two from southern France. Government job, nice house, nothing remarkable whatsoever. He'd wake up, kiss his wife goodbye, drive through morning traffic cursing under his breath, just like everyone else. At the office, he'd shuffle paperwork, chat with co-workers about weekend plans, complain about his boss. After work, home to help with homework, maybe watch some TV, fall asleep on the couch. The definition of ordinary. Except for one tiny thing. His left leg had been feeling weak lately. Not painful, not debilitating, just off. Like it wasn't quite responding the way it should. So in 2007, after his wife nagged him enough, he finally dragged himself to the doctor. They suggested a brain scan, just to be safe. Rule out anything weird. He shrugged and agreed, figuring he'd be in and out in an hour. He lay down in the MRI machine, listening to that rhythmic thunk, 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 echoing around him, staring at the beige ceiling, probably thinking about what to have for dinner. He had no idea that in the next room, doctors were about to see something that would make them question everything they knew about human consciousness. Because when those images finally loaded on the screen, they realized his brain was almost completely gone. The radiologist froze. Then she leaned closer to the monitor, squinted, refreshed the image. That can't be right. She called in a colleague, then another. Within minutes, 5 doctors crowded around a single computer screen, staring in complete silence. Where there should have been dense, intricate brain tissue, the wrinkled grey matter we all learn about in school, there was just black space, an enormous cavity, a void. Nearly 90% of his skull was filled with nothing but cerebrospinal fluid. His brain had been compressed into a thin ribbon of tissue, barely thicker than an orange peel, pressed desperately against the inside of his skull, like wallpaper peeling away from a wall. One doctor muttered what everyone was thinking. How is he even alive? They checked the machine, ran the scan again. Same result. They pulled up textbooks, called specialists, scrolled through medical databases. Nothing. No case like this had ever been documented where the patient was functional. Because here's the thing. According to every neurology textbook ever written, this man should have been brain dead, vegetative state at best, unable to speak, move, or recognize his own family. And yet, just down the hall he sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine, occasionally checking his watch, wondering what was taking so long. He could walk, he could talk, he had a job, he had memories. He knew his wife's name, his kids' birthdays, the route home from work. The doctors stood there, looking at his scan, then looking at each other, realizing they were staring at something that shouldn't exist. A walking, talking medical impossibility. But when they started digging through his old medical records, they found something that finally began to make sense of the impossible. The investigation began immediately. Neurologists pulled every file they could find. Childhood records, immunization charts, school health screenings, anything that might explain how a human being could function with almost no brain. And then, buried in a dusty folder from the 1970s, they found it. Hydrocephalus. When he was just 6 months old, doctors had diagnosed him with water on the brain, a condition where cerebrospinal fluid can't drain properly and starts building up inside the skull. Back then, they'd inserted a shunt to drain the excess fluid, and it seemed to work. Case closed. But But here's what no one realized at the time. Over the next 4 decades, that fluid had been slowly, silently creeping back, millimeter by millimeter, year by year, pressing against his brain tissue like a slow-motion tidal wave, compressing it bit by bit until there was almost nothing left. It should have killed him. It should have left him paralyzed, speechless, trapped inside his own body. But instead, something extraordinary happened. His brain fought back, not with force, but with adaptation. As the fluid pushed inward, his remaining neurons began reorganizing themselves, rerouting, rewiring, taking on jobs they were never designed to do. Think about it like this. Imagine you're living in a house, and every month one room gets flooded and becomes unusable. So you adapt. You move the kitchen into the bedroom, the office into the bathroom. You squeeze your entire life into whatever space is left. And somehow, impossibly, it still works. That's what his brain did. The tissue responsible for movement found new pathways. Memory centers relocated. Language processing rerouted itself like traffic taking side streets around construction. The doctors called it neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. But this wasn't just neuroplasticity. This was neuroplasticity on a scale no one had ever seen before. And it raised one terrifying, beautiful question. If this man can live a normal life with only 10% of his brain, how much of our brain do we actually need? Let's talk about what actually happened inside his skull, because it's genuinely mind-blowing. For years, scientists believed the brain was like a machine. Each part had a job. Damage one part, lose that function. Simple, permanent, irreversible. This man proved them all wrong. As the fluid crushed his brain tissue over decades, something incredible was happening at the microscopic level. Neurons were reaching out, forming new connections. Synapses were rerouting signals. Entire networks were dissolving and reforming in different parts of his brain. It's like if Google Maps detected that the highway was destroyed, so it rebuilt the entire road system overnight to keep traffic flowing. That's not supposed to be possible, but his brain did it anyway. Now, let's be clear. He wasn't a genius. His IQ tested at 75, which is below average. He had some social difficulties. He walked with a slight limp. But he could think. He could reason. He held down a job for years. He raised 2 kids. He had conversations, told jokes, got angry at bad drivers. He was human, fully, completely human, with a brain the size of a tennis ball. When neuroscientists published his case in the medical journal The Lancet, it sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Suddenly, researchers studying stroke recovery, traumatic brain injuries, and neurodegenerative diseases had proof that the brain was far more resilient than anyone imagined. It meant that people who'd suffered massive brain damage might have more hope than doctors previously thought. It meant recovery might be possible in cases where it seemed impossible. But beyond all the medical implications, beyond the research papers and the textbook rewrites, his case forced us to confront something much deeper. If you can be you with only a sliver of brain tissue, then where does you actually live? Here's where this story gets deeply, unsettlingly weird. If a man can lose 90% of his brain and still be himself, then what exactly is the self? Is your personality stored in your neurons, your memories, Your frontal lobe? Or is consciousness something else entirely? Something we can't scan, measure, or point to on an MRI? Some neuroscientists looked at his case and said, "See? This proves consciousness is distributed throughout the brain. It's not in one place, it's everywhere." Others said, "No, this proves consciousness is more than just the physical brain. There's something beyond the tissue, something we don't understand yet." And a few just shook their heads and admitted, "We have no idea." Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't actually know how consciousness works. We can map the brain. We can trace neural pathways. We can watch neurons fire in real time. But we still can't explain how a 3-pound lump of wet tissue creates thoughts, feelings, dreams, fears, love. And this man, this quiet civil servant who never wanted fame or attention, became a living embodiment of that mystery. To him, it didn't matter. He wasn't interested in philosophy or neuroscience. He just wanted to go home, have dinner with his family, and get back to his normal life. And that's exactly what he did. So what happened to him? He went home, back to work, back to his family. Doctors adjusted his shunt, drained some of the excess fluid, and monitored him closely. But there was no miracle cure, no surgery that could give him his brain back. He didn't need one. He continued living, not as a medical marvel, but as a man, flawed, ordinary, and impossibly resilient. His case became one of the most studied neurological anomalies in modern medicine. Researchers still reference him in papers about brain plasticity, consciousness, and human adaptability. His scans are shown in medical schools around the world. But to him, he was never a miracle. He was just a guy with a weird leg problem who happened to have almost no brain. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Maybe the most extraordinary thing about the human brain isn't what it has, but what it can do without. Maybe we've been underestimating ourselves this entire time. Because if a man can live, love, laugh, and work with barely a fraction of his brain, what else are we capable of that we've never even tried? And if you think that story was unbelievable, wait until you hear about the woman who literally cannot feel pain. Not a paper cut, not a broken bone, nothing. That's next.